I recently saw a documentary that made me want to buy less new things and find ways to give used materials new life. So I had the idea of making a holiday dress that is from a thrifted tablecloth and using a free pattern. Here's the plan. I'm going to use a free pattern for the bodice from Mood Fabric. Then I'm going to make the skirt out of 2 rectangles. I'll draft a puffy sleeve pattern that I'll share with you. Then I will self-draft the bodice facing and show you how to do the same. The main supplies for this project will be a large thrifted tablecloth, elastic for the puffy sleeves, and a long zipper for the back of the bodice that I will remove from an old dress that has holes in it. As you can see, I'm not in my usual sewing space. I was visiting family, but I was way too excited about this idea to not start right away. Here's the old dress I'm going to take the zipper from, and here's the large tablecloth that I am using for the fabric. It's either giving Christmas vibes or Wicked vibes or both. To make the bodice, I'm using a free pattern from Mood Fabrics, and I will put the link in the description. It's called the Pine Dress, and even though I'm not making this dress, the bodice part is a great foundation for sewing other things. Now that you have the free pattern, you only need to print out these specific pages. Tape the pages together and cut out your size. For reference, I chose size 4/6, which seems to correlate to size small correctly. To remove a zipper, use a seam ripper to carefully remove the stitches from the front and back until it's completely detached. I recommend finding a zipper that's almost the length of the back bodice so it's easy to get in and out of the dress. Clean up the leftover threads. Iron the wrinkles out of the tablecloth. Line up the front bodice pattern on the fold of the fabric. Trace around the pattern with tailor's chalk or a water erasable marker. You might want to pin the fabric together to make it easier to cut out. Then cut out your front bodice. Mark the darts onto the front bodice. Now trace the back bodice on the fold. Cut out the back bodice. Then mark the darts. Pinch the darts together with right sides together and pin along the chalk lines for the front and back bodice pieces. Find a thread to match your tablecloth fabric. Sew the darts onto the front and back bodice pieces without back stitching and leave a couple inches of excess thread at the end of each dart to tie 3 knots with. Cut off any remaining loose threads. Iron the side darts down and the bottom darts away from the center. The back bodice pattern has a larger shoulder measurement than the front, so for the dress we are making, cut away a bit of outside shoulder so that the front and back bodice shoulder seams match. Pin the shoulder seams together with right sides together. Sew the shoulder seams together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Iron the shoulder seams open. Pin the side seams together with right sides together. Now sew the side seams together. In case you don't have an overlocker like me, change your sewing machine to a zigzag stitch. Zigzag stitch along the edge of the side seams to prevent fraying. Iron the side seams towards the back bodice. With a straight stitch, sew the side seams down along the fabric edge. Then zigzag stitch the shoulder seams and straight stitch the edge of the fabric down as well, like we did for the side seams. To make the bodice facing, you can trace the neckline from the pattern onto a separate piece of paper according to the size you are using. You will need to do this for the front and back bodice necklines. The facing pieces will look roughly like this, and we will use them to cut fabric on the fold at the bottom of each piece. And the width will be about 2 inches or 5 centimeters for each facing piece. For both the front and back bodice, trace the bodice neckline, make the width around 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Then connect the top and bottom of the neckline with a curve. Cut your facing pattern pieces out. Then line your pattern pieces on the fabric fold, trace the pattern pieces, and cut out the fabric. Here's what they should look like. Now for the back bodice, there will be a zipper, so cut the back bodice facing piece exactly in half where it was folded. Pin the front and back facing pieces together with right sides together and sew them. Now you should have this open loop. Iron the seams open, then zigzag stitch around the outer edge of the facing. This next part is optional, but you can also fold the zigzag edge over, iron it, and then do a top stitch if you prefer. To put in the zipper later, cut down the length of the center of the back bodice, exactly where it was folded when you cut it out. Line up the facing to the bodice with the right sides together and pin it in place. Then sew the facing onto the bodice, leaving about an inch unsewn at the beginning and end to make room for the zipper. Carefully cut notches onto the seam allowance without damaging the seams. This will help the facing lay nicely and reduce bulk. Iron the facing down, creating a clean crease at the neckline. Top stitch along the edge of the neckline to keep the facing down, again leaving an inch unsewn at the beginning and end. For the zipper, I highly recommend watching the tutorial from Sew Anastasia. I will leave the link in the description. But basically, you line up the zipper, mark the end of the zipper on the back bodice. Then sew the back bodice pieces together with right sides together with a long basting stitch until you get to the mark. At the mark, back stitch. Change the stitch length back to normal and continue sewing to the bottom of the back bodice. Iron the new seam open. Unzip the zipper and place it on the seam. Pin one side of the zipper down, lining the teeth up with the center of the seam. Switch to a zipper foot. Then sew down the length of the zipper, not too close to the zipper teeth, more in the middle. When you get a stitch or two past the little metal piece at the end of the zipper, leave your needle in and rotate everything to stitch horizontally underneath the zipper end. Then rotate everything again to sew straight back up vertically on the other side of the zipper. I found it easiest to zip the zipper back up for this part. Then with a seam ripper, rip open the long basting stitches that the zipper is hiding behind just until the end of the zipper. For both sides, fold the edge of the facing under and pin it in place lined up right next to the zipper. Sew the facing edge to the side of the zipper on both sides. Here's what the bodice looks like so far. For the puffy sleeves, I drafted and graded a sleeve pattern for this video, which is in sizes small through extra large and can be found in the description. You will need to cut 2 on the fold. So iron more of your fabric. Cut out the amount of fabric you will need for 2 sleeves. On the fold, trace your sleeve pattern onto the fabric. Then cut out both sleeves from the fabric. For each sleeve, you will need to sew 2 rows of long gathering stitches at 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. Set your stitch length the longest possible for this. Sew your rows of gathering stitches along the top of the sleeve, leaving plenty of excess thread at the beginning and end to make gathering easier later. Pin the sleeve seams together with right sides together. Sew both sleeves. Iron the sleeve seams open. Determine the width of the elastic you will be using. Mine is about 1/4 inch. Fold the end of the sleeve over and iron it so it's slightly wider than the width of your elastic. Then fold it over again by the same amount and iron it again. Then sew close to the edge of the hem all the way around the sleeve, leaving about 1 inch unsewn to make room for the elastic to go inside. For the elastic, you will need 2 pieces, 1 for each sleeve. They should each be about the length of the circumference of your upper arm, plus about 1/2 inch for sewing the ends together. For each of the elastic pieces, attach a small safety pin to the end and push and pull the elastic through the opening at the end of the sleeve. Once the elastic is all the way through, overlap the elastic by about 1/4 inch on each end and zigzag stitch the ends together. Adjust the elastic so it's nicely enclosed in the sleeve hem and sew the opening closed. Now you have 2 finished sleeves, and it's time to attach them to the bodice. Turn the bodice inside out. Use your gathering stitches to carefully gather the top of the sleeve. Push your sleeve into the armhole so that the right sides are together. Align the seams and adjust the gathering so that the sleeve fits well in the armhole. Pin the sleeve to the armhole, then sew in place. Now do the same thing with the other sleeve. Remove any excess threads hanging off the sleeves. With a seam ripper, remove any visible gathering stitches on the outside of the sleeve. And here's the finished bodice. For the skirt, you will need to cut out 2 rectangles. For the width of each, take your waist measurement multiplied by 1.5, divided by 2, and add 3/4 inch or 2 centimeters. For the length of each, take your desired length from your waist, and then add 1.75 inches or 4 centimeters. I started with a desired length of being to my knees, and then shortened it later. Pin the side of your 2 rectangles together with right sides together. And sew the side seams. Then zigzag stitch the fabric edge on both sides to prevent fraying. Iron the seams down, and with a straight stitch, sew the edge of the seam down on both sides of the rectangles. On the top of the skirt, sew 2 rows of gathering stitches using your longest stitch length at a 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch seam allowance. Leave at least 6 inches of excess thread on either end for gathering later. Gather the top of the skirt by carefully pulling on the top threads of the gathering stitches and evenly spreading the fabric gathering around the skirt. Once the gathered part of the skirt is the same circumference as the bottom of the bodice, line up the skirt to the bodice with right sides together so that the side seams are aligned, and pin in place. It helps to use a lot of pins for this part. Sew the skirt onto the bodice, then cut off any excess threads. After holding the dress up or trying it on, decide if you want the dress to be shorter. I decided to shorten mine. If you do, remeasure the length you want, adding at least 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters to the bottom for hemming. Now that you have the right length, turn your dress inside out and fold and iron the hem of the skirt twice by about 1/2 inch each time. Pin the hem in place. Sew the hem close to the edge of the fabric's fold. Then cut off any loose threads. Now you can flip your dress right side out and admire your work. This dress totally exceeded my expectations. It turned out incredible. I really can't believe it came from a used tablecloth, and I'm very much looking forward to wearing it to the next holiday event.